On a sunny morning in Monterey, Aurora was in her usual routine, full of energy and dedication. However, something inside began to bother her, a persistent cough that accompanied her even in the calmest moments, a fatigue that seemed to increase day after day, and a subtle but constant pain in her chest. Initially ignoring these symptoms as mere passing annoyances, Aurora immersed herself in her work and her daily responsibilities, hoping that everything would resolve itself. But when the symptoms persisted and began to affect her daily life, Aurora couldn't help but face reality. Afraid of what she might discover, she scheduled a doctor's appointment. The silence in the waiting room only increased her anxiety as she waited to be called to receive the news that could change her life forever. The atmosphere in the oncologist's office was solemn, with the ticking of the clock marking each second with overwhelming weight. Aurora, feeling a mixture of apprehension and hope, awaited the doctor's words with a sympathetic look. As the doctor began to explain the situation, Aurora felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. "I did not expect this. He had always taken care of his health. How could it be that I was now facing such a daunting diagnosis?" The doctor's words echoed in his mind: lung cancer in an almost advanced stage. Aurora could barely process the severity of the situation. The doctor's words echoed in her mind: lung cancer in an almost advanced stage. Aurora could barely process the severity of the situation. The doctor, offering a sympathetic look, tried to instill some hope. "Cancer often doesn't show clear signs until it is in a more advanced stage," he explained. "But even now we have treatment options. We are here to fight alongside you." Aurora absorbed the words with a mix of fear and determination. What path would you take now? How would she face this battle that loomed over her? With a trembling voice, but gaining new resolve, he asked the doctor what the next step would be. Back home, Aurora found herself in a space she had lovingly and carefully decorated, a refuge that now seemed filled with uncertainty and worry. Sitting in her living room, surrounded by memories of happy family moments, Aurora was preparing to share the news with her husband Emiliano and her son Diego. Back home, Aurora found herself in a space she had lovingly and carefully decorated, a refuge that now seemed filled with uncertainty and worry. Sitting in her living room, surrounded by memories of happy family moments, Aurora was preparing to share the news with her husband Emiliano and her son Diego. In the days that followed, as Aurora reflected on the impact of the news on her life and career, she began to organize her priorities. She knew she would have to balance treatment with her responsibilities, but she was determined to stay strong for her family. Inside that house, a new phase of challenges and overcoming began as Aurora's treatment intensified. A subtle but profound change began to creep into their home. Since the diagnosis, the routine became a joint effort between her husband and son. Each morning, they organized meticulously to ensure that all of Aurora's needs were taken care of. Emiliano was in charge of administering the medications, making sure that Aurora took them on time and accompanying her to the numerous doctor appointments and chemotherapy sessions. On the other hand, her son Diego took on the task of preparing balanced, easy-to-digest meals, adapting to Aurora's changes in palate and appetite. However, despite the initial care, with time and increased care, the atmosphere in the house began to change. Emiliano and Diego, previously pillars of strength and support, now seemed to waver in the face of Aurora's growing needs. Simple requests for help were often met with a tired sigh or even ignored. Aurora watched her family's silent resistance with a mixture of sadness and understanding. On one particularly challenging morning, when Aurora needed to get to the hospital for chemotherapy, she found the house enveloped in a heavy silence. Emiliano was still in bed and showed no intention of getting up. Aurora, who was downstairs, called Emiliano from the couple's room upstairs and asked if he could help her prepare for the trip to the hospital. There was a brief silence before Emiliano responded with a barely convincing excuse, claiming a night of sleeplessness and fatigue. With a heavy heart, but without losing hope, Aurora decided that she must find a solution to ease the burden on her family. She remembered hearing about skilled nursing services for cancer patients and decided to investigate that option. After a careful search and some recommendations from friends, Aurora found someone who seemed like a good fit for her needs, an oncology nurse with experience managing patients in situations similar to hers. He decided to take the plunge and hire their services, hoping that this would alleviate some of the burden on Emiliano and Diego. The arrival of the nurse marked a significant change in the family dynamic. Their presence not only provided tangible relief in terms of medical care and support, but also seemed to bring a sense of calm and order to the house. Emiliano and Diego, although initially skeptical, eventually began to appreciate the added value that the nurse brought to their daily lives. Over time, Aurora began to feel increasingly distant from her husband and son. Conversations that had previously flowed freely were now marked by an air of awkwardness and distrust. Emiliano, in particular, seemed to withdraw more and more, seeking refuge in his work and other distractions to avoid facing the reality of the situation. Aurora, feeling increasingly isolated and neglected, decided to address family tensions head-on. He gathered Emiliano and Diego in the living room on a sunny afternoon, hoping to open an honest dialogue about how they were facing the disease together and its implications for the future. However, the conversation did not go as Aurora had expected. As she attempted to express her concerns and feelings, she was met with evasive responses and a palpable lack of empathy from Emiliano and Diego. They realized there was a growing gap between them, fueled by resentment and lack of communication. The situation came to a head when, after a particularly grueling session of chemotherapy, Aurora returned home to find Emiliano and Diego packing their belongings. With her heart in her hand, she asked them what was happening, only to be greeted with cold and distant responses. Emiliano explained that they had decided to temporarily move to his mother's house, away from the negativity and constant worries related to Aurora's illness. Aurora, feeling abandoned and heartbroken, tried in vain to convince them to stay. But her pleas fell on deaf ears as Emiliano and Diego walked away, leaving her alone in a house that was once full of love and laughter. Aurora, overwhelmed by pain and loneliness, took refuge in the company of her cousin Yolanda, who had been closely following Aurora's situation. Yolanda, with her unwavering warmth and compassion, became a beacon of hope in the midst of the darkness that surrounded Aurora. Over time, the treatment began to show signs of success. Aurora experienced a marked improvement in her health and her spirit was lifted with hope for a brighter future. She continued her medical appointments and chemotherapy sessions with determination, facing each challenge with courage and renewed optimism. After Aurora recovered and grew stronger with the support of her cousin Yolanda, her husband Emiliano and son Diego returned unexpectedly. However, it was not for a change of heart, but to claim the family inheritance. Although Aurora felt a mix of emotions upon seeing them, she remained steadfast in her determination to move forward with her life. Aurora wished them the best and decided to focus on her own health and well-being. Although it hurt to see her family leave again, she knew that her strength and resilience would carry her to a brighter future, regardless of who was by her side. With Yolanda's love and support, Aurora continued on her path with courage and hope, ready to face any challenge that destiny had in store for her.